This 49th Legislative District Live Telephone Town Hall with your state legislators, Senator Annette Cleveland, Representative Monica Stonier, and Representative Sharon Wylie. If you have a question for your legislators, please press 0. The 49th Legislative District covers part of Clark County, including part of Vancouver and Hazeldale. My name is Lily, and I will be your host tonight. Thank you for taking the time to join us. If you have a question for Senator Annette Cleveland, Representatives Monica Stonier, and Representative Sharon Wylie, please press 0 right now to speak with your lawmakers. I will now turn it over to your legislators for some opening remarks. Let's start with Senator Cleveland.
Good evening, everybody. So pleased to be here again with my 49th Legislative District team. We've been hard at work here in Olympia, and this has been a particularly intense session this year due to the challenges that we face with budget shortfalls and some uncertainty, obviously, at the federal level, and great many policy expectations, particularly for those new legislators who have joined the Olympia this year. So, as always, I'm here in the Senate working hard to focus on overarching priorities of access to education, access to economic security, a job, access to health care, and I'm really pleased that putting people first continues to be our priority in the Senate and as Democrats, and just looking forward to a good discussion tonight and any of your questions that you may have. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm real glad to be here with my colleagues, and it's hard for us to get together, but this is a good time. We are facing a very challenging session, and for me, the challenge is to make sure that our taxes are fair and as sufficient as possible during a very challenging economic time. I'm working hard on the Transportation Committee to make sure that we keep moving ahead towards a green future, making sure that we replace our I-5 bridge and continue electrifying so that we can preserve our planet. Climate change and budget shortfalls and a lot of challenges are facing us, but we're working hard to pay attention to the needs of our district and put people first. This is my first year on the Environment Committee, and so I'm working on clean air and water issues as well.
Thank you. Remember to press 0 on your keypad right now to ask your question. And now we have Representative Monica Stonier.
Thank you, and thank you all for your interest in what's happening in Olympia. I will tell you that we have had record attendance around the state in town halls over the last couple of weeks, which is a strong demonstration to us that our constituents are paying close attention, not just to what we're doing here in Olympia on behalf of Washingtonians, but how we might be responding to the uncertainty and political whiplash coming out of the other Washington. So we've been watching that news closely, but remain very focused on what we need to do here for our state. We have just completed the period of time where bills are introduced and are now headed over to the opposite chamber. But notable for today, Senator Cleveland and I, both in our respective caucuses, are voting on the budgets that were proposed by each of our caucuses. And so the next couple of weeks for constituents will be probably focused on how we will bring those two objectives or those two approaches into alignment to better the state.
All right, press 0 right now to ask a question. We sent you a survey to collect questions ahead of time, so I'm going to start with some of those internet questions. First up, we have Samantha, who has a question for Representative Stonier. I'm going to read it to you. I am very confused about House Bill 1296, the Parental Rights Bill. We voted for the initiative, but now with this bill, I don't even understand what it does anymore. Could you please explain in simple terms how this is supposed to be good for children and their parents? It just sounds like now as parents we will be hands-off. And also, are we or are we not going to be notified immediately when something happens to our kids while in school, especially if that something is of a sexual or violent nature?
Oh, thank you, Samantha. I noticed that there were several questions on this topic, so I'm glad we're starting off with an opportunity to provide some clarity. First and foremost, I will just share that with highly political or politicized bills, there's often a great deal of misinformation that is circulated. And so I'm grateful to have a chance to try and clear the record a little bit. First of all, Initiative 2081, yes, was passed last year, and many of us in the House and in the Senate voted for that. But before we did so, we asked very clear questions of our legal staff. Those questions were related to whether or not this changes anything in healthcare policy. The answer was no. Unfortunately, the rhetoric, again, hyper-politicized around this bill, led parents to think that we did have some change in healthcare policy. So part of this, the purpose of this bill is to bring clarity that the bill only affects what happens in schools. Secondly, I will just point out that the bill as passed the House included parental rights. The difference is that this bill starts with talking about a student's right to a safe and supportive learning environment. That means they will have access to a learning environment free of discrimination. It means that we commit to teaching students accurate, historically accurate social studies lessons and scientifically accurate science. It makes sure that students are free from discrimination and also provides protections for school employees who want to uphold those student rights. It does nothing to undermine the rights of parents to be the first teachers and fully involved in their school experiences. In fact, we reiterate many of the parental rights that have been on the books for years, like the opportunity to review curriculum, the ability to opt a student out of certain lessons that parents would not feel comfortable their students learning at school, the ability for parents to review records at school related to academics, and absolutely to the final point in your question, to be immediately notified when something dangerous is happening at school. The Republicans have made great fun with criticizing a policy that has been on the books for 20 years. That policy said that when something dangerous is happening at school, parents would be notified immediately or within 48 hours. That is a result of a bill from 20 years ago that was introduced by both a Republican and a Democratic senator, one of those being Don Benton, and passed unanimously through the legislature. It is clear that we now more frequently contact parents immediately. So we have made changes under this bill regarding immediate notification so that parents are notified as early as possible when there is something dangerous happening at school. So again, I thank you for the question because the rhetoric around this bill has been very frustrating and has been misleading on intent and effect. I look forward to any more questions folks have about the bill and how we might deliver on it in the future. If your questions don't get answered tonight, I hope you will email me so I can answer your questions directly.
Thank you. Folks, if you are just joining us, this is a live telephone town hall with your 49th District legislators, Senator Annette Cleveland and Representatives Sharon Wylie and Monica Stonier. If you have a question for one or all of them, please press 0 now. Our next question is from Anthony, and it's also one of the internet questions. What are your plans to help ensure supported employment and community inclusion services for adults with developmental disabilities preserved, and how are you supporting closing down the isolating rural health clinics?
I'll start with that. I think that all of us serve on different committees, so we have different pieces of that. I know that in the House budget, we started out by establishing our priorities to make sure that any services or training or things that we do to protect and help the most vulnerable among us and disabled folks would be at the top of the list. We're trying very hard in this tight budget year to make sure that those are the services that we fund first. And so all of that is being negotiated. We've had 2 giant budgets, and we're in the process of going through and matching them up so that everybody's priorities can be addressed. But I know that we're prioritizing vulnerable people first.
The only thing I'll add is that we have RHCs that are places where people with the most acute needs are. We also know that receiving support care and healthcare services in community where people are closer to home is not only less expensive but healthier for folks who may be residing at an RHC. And our intent in the bills and budget we're working on this year is to do what we can to strike the balance, which is to bring people who are able to be closer to their communities to that location and make sure that we still have locations where folks who have far more acute needs have a place that's safe for them to be as well. So we'll continue working on trying to strike that balance.
And this is Senator Cleveland. I'll add from the healthcare perspective, this is actually an effort that we have spent a great deal of time and number of years working on because our residential habitation centers are seeing drastically declining occupancy due to the fact that, unfortunately, those folks are passing away. They've spent their lives there, but because those residential habitation centers are not being utilized, and because our focus has really been in supporting families who want their loved ones to be near them in their community, receiving the services that they need in a community-based manner, we just didn't have the need to keep those residential habitation centers open when there was no one they were going to be serving as time went on. And so there's been a very strategic and very thoughtful and very compassionate plan to ensure that as the closures are phased in, and this will take time, that those who need to be relocated will have that support and be allowed the dignity to determine what the best fit for them is going forward. So, happy to talk more about this.
Thank you. Please press 0 if you have a question. We are going to go with a live question now from Alyssa, who has a question about our upside-down tax code. Hi, Alyssa. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I'm a Washington State employee, so I am a union member of the Washington State Federation of Employees. This is my 10th year in public service. This is my 2nd year working for the Washington State Department of Health. Previously, I was working for Clark County. And I've been really encouraged to work for the Washington State Department of Health with the infusion of foundational public health services that allowed me to actually have my position created. But I'm just super bummed out and frustrated by the Senate budget proposal and the bills that are proposing healthcare cost increases for Washington State employees, suspends union negotiations, proposes furloughs. As a Washington State employee working to improve water recreation across Washington and including Clark County, working specifically at the lakes there and working to educate our public on harmful algal blooms, I really just don't think any of us Washington State employees deserve a pay cut, especially when you all are giving yourselves a pay increase. So I'm just wondering, what are you doing to fix the budget so that way you're not relying on Washington State workers to fix the deficit and instead make the healthy pay their fair share?
I'm grateful for the question. This is Senator Cleveland, and I want you to know that first and foremost, what we focused on in the budget is ensuring that we retained as many jobs as possible, and the alternatives then were to temporarily look at some salary reductions and some additional leave for employees that would be unpaid for a period of 1 year. And it's needed in order for us to transition to the other sources of revenue that we have put forward to help balance the cuts. We knew that there was no possible way to address the tremendous budget shortfall that we face without a combination of cuts and revenue, and we have been very, very careful about ensuring that we do the least harm possible. So appreciate the question.
And this is Monica Stonier. I will just share one detail that I think folks are usually surprised to find out. We have an independent commission unrelated to the legislature that determines our salary. So we are not giving ourselves a pay increase. That pay level is set by an independent commission that assesses the pay for like work around the country and state to make sure that we are aligned with other pay scales. I will say that does not always consider the kind of budget situation that we are in. You can rest assured that we are taking a look at what we can do to save costs in the operations of government, including in cases, at least in the House, and I think the Senate is taking some similar measures, assessing what our operations look like during the interim. So, for example, canceling interim trips where we normally go to learn about how our budgets and our policies impact other parts of the state. This is where we've had opportunities to visit things like rural hospitals or school settings where we make policy and budget decisions. We're going to be suspending a lot of that work, and we're going to be looking at our own internal budgets to save costs where we can, so that we are not treated differently than the rest of the state as we're looking at this budget shortfall.
And I will add, this is Sharon, I will add that we have been spending many, many weeks on the Finance Committee looking at all of the possible changes in our revenue that can help us avoid the more drastic cuts. And there are two different visions in two different budgets, and the work going forward will be to really take a deep dive into all of the implications and impacts of that. And I'm committed to taking hard votes if I have to, or when I have to make sure that we have progressive revenue. We worked for 12 years to get a capital gains tax in place, and now is a time when we need to look at what we have to do to preserve the good things that we've invested in and make sure that our people have what we need and that we retain the employees that have been doing the good work. So nothing is fully finished yet. There are a lot of conversations that still have to happen, and a lot of us are going to be working really hard to try to make the cuts less drastic and make them more fair. It's a work in progress.
And this is Monica again. We have the second to last the second to worst record for an upside down tax code. So to take your question about the fairness there seriously, I will just share with you that both chambers have revenue packages with progressive revenue included in them. And as you heard Sharon, Representative Wylie talking about, when we finally did get capital gains passed, we had to wait for the court to make a ruling on that. So those funds don't necessarily help our budget situation right away if they're going to be challenged by the state or by the court or in the court. So we also have to make sure we deliver on that, on balancing that tax code, and we'll continue doing that work.
Thank you. If you have a question for your 49th District lawmakers, please press 0 now. And next we have another internet question. This is from Susan. My rent is already high. Last year you didn't pass this bill. Will this year be different?
I think the prognosis, this is Sharon again, the prognosis for getting a rent stabilization bill through is has good momentum, and I supported it. In fact, everybody at this table is supporting mechanisms to try to slow down the rent increases while we do everything possible to increase the supply, because we all know that that's part of the picture as well.
Absolutely. I'll just add that Governor Ferguson has been clear about his priority in terms of addressing excessive rent increases. I think that there's broad agreement that that is definitely something we have to address this year, and there's been a tremendous amount of work toward that effort, and that effort's going to continue to the final days of the session this year.
Thank you. Press 0 if you have a question for your lawmakers. Next up is a live question. It is David, who has a question about the bridge and tolls. Hey, David.
Hi. I have a question that I want to ask about the bridge plan that would implement tolls on Washington residents driving into Oregon. Most residents that drive into Oregon every day are working in Oregon and paying income tax to the state of Oregon. The historical records for the state of Oregon show that we pay over $200 million on average a year to the state of Oregon that is not refunded to us. So why are we being asked to pay tolls for something that we've already paid for 10 years over?
That's a really good question, and we get that question a lot. Every bridge that's built has tolls when it's first built. It's one of the ways that we pay for that infrastructure, and so far we have never figured out another way around it. I know that it's painful. I've been in that spot where I lived over here and I worked in Oregon a long time ago. So I know how grinding it is to pay that Oregon income tax. As we work through the problem of building the bridge and figuring out what each state's role in the funding and what the Fed's role is and trying to keep tolls as low as possible, all of that will be looked at and considered, but I don't know of any bridge that's ever been built in our country, especially one of this magnitude, that is without tolls. We'll do everything we can to keep them low, and we're working on it. Bridges take a long time to get all the pieces together, and this one's taken longer than most.
Absolutely, and this is Annette. I'll add that the current I-5 bridge that all of us have benefited from was paid for by tolls that our grandparents and our parents paid so that we could have the ability to move goods and services, travel to our jobs, take our families where we need to go. So it's definitely our turn to step up now and invest in infrastructure that then our children and grandchildren can also benefit from, and ensure that they can also have good jobs and count on a modern structure that's going to stand up and be safe. And I will say also, tolls are a user fee, and so I can't think of a better way to have those who use a piece of infrastructure to help pay for it. And this bridge is a mega project, and it has many different funding sources. So it's all in. All of us need to put our shoulders to the wheel to help ensure that our community continue to thrive and that we have the infrastructure we need to be healthy.
Thank you. We are about halfway through this call, so if you have a question, please press 0 now. Next up, we have a live question. It is Christine, who has a question about the First Amendment. Hi, Christine.
Hi. So my question is regarding both in the U.S. and Washington State Constitution, we have the right to free speech and the right to form a militia. Given the increased kidnapping and arresting and deporting, or being in the process of deporting people who are exercising their right to free speech, my question is, as state legislators, are you working with local police departments, state troopers, National Guard, or anyone else to protect Washingtonians who are practicing their First Amendment right to free speech?
Yes, I would say, this is Monica, I would say we are watching this issue from every angle. We are very focused on the Keep Washington Working bill that we passed in years before, to make sure that we are working with local for sure, local state troopers as a National Guard, and we're also taking time to think about what we haven't done. You know, the last time we were under a Trump administration when these topics were of real concern, we passed a number of bills that I'm proud to have in place now, and now we're benefiting from that work, and we have an opportunity to look at where the gaps still might be. So, for example, we passed a bill that is now over in the Senate that would ensure that we can communicate to law enforcement or federal officers coming into our state that they must have our permission and operate under our state laws. And so that's a really important example of how we are working with law enforcement across all levels to ensure that Washingtonians can go about their daily lives, go to work, perhaps take time to handle immigration-related matters, and be well read in on their rights in times where they may also want to show up and use their right to free speech in community spaces where they may not always feel protected.
Thank you. Please press 0 if you have a question. Next up is a live question from Kathy about pensions. Hi, Kathy.
Hi. First off, I want to thank you for all of the work that you are doing. I know this is an incredibly rough year, and the budget is pretty tough this year to be working out. Luckily, the question I have deals with Senate Bill 5080, which is not really targeting any budget money that you have. Basically, it's a bill that is addressing the TERS and PERS funding that has really never been sustainable for retired teachers that are on that pension funding, one of them being my mother. My mother taught, I have taught, both of my kids teach. She's 80 years old and on a walker and having to substitute teach. And it's just something that's been going on and on with not ever receiving any COLAs. Senator Cleveland, I want to thank you for the Senate Bill 5080 going through. And I really, really want to say how excited teachers are about that bill, because it's taking that one group of teachers and finally making them whole by taking all of the pension funds and rolling them together in that legacy retirement system. And the fact that it's actually saving the state $600 million and local governments up to $475 million is another great benefit and I would say a benefit for all of you is that you're not having to face this 20% shortfall on this pension every year and trying to figure out how you're going to scrape it out year after budget, I should say. I'm just trying to get them even. So I guess my question really is for both Representative Stonier and Representative Wylie. What are you doing, hopefully, to encourage the House to support this Senate bill? I do know that the House does have their House bills 2034 and 1467, and that's also it's taking some of that LEAF money that would make the teacher pension whole and just, like, from my understanding, stockpiling it for 4 years so you could just spend it wherever it needs to be at that point. But it's not really fixing the problem.
I'm looking forward to having a chance to solve this problem once and for all. I've been here for 14 years, and I'm very saddened at our teachers that were in that particular group and how they have to come back over and over again. And I think that I'm looking forward to having a fairly elegant solution that is good for the state and it's good for those people who put in their service to our children and got kind of a raw deal in the pension area.
And we've been hearing about this for years. And as a teacher myself, and knowing lots of those TERS 1 teachers who were mentors to me in my early years of teaching, I know how important it is for them to be able to not just survive, but potentially thrive in their senior years retired. The Senate bill has an eloquent approach to thinking about pensions that are solvent and over invested, and solving another problem for a different workforce in our state. And the House has a similar goal, but a different approach. And the beauty of where we are right now, beauty/challenge, is that we are going to be taking a look at the different approaches to the same problem in each of the chambers and find a way to come to some agreement on those. So I think that's exactly one of the examples I was talking about at the top of our call, where we are going to see some alignment between the two chambers come into focus here in the next couple weeks.
I think the commitment is there, and I look forward to that.
Kathy, this is Annette. I just want to say thank you for your question. Thank you for the recognition of the bill that passed the Senate, and know that the cost of living adjustments remain a priority for us to fund. And so know that I'm going to continue to champion that as well.
All right, thank you. Please press 0 if you have a question for your lawmakers. Next up, we have Jeannie. And Jeannie has a question about medical care. Hi, Jeannie.
Hi, how are you all? And thank you for taking my question. But on the news the other day, I saw where, this is regarding health care and medical cuts, that the health care was cut for those who are taking after methadone treatments daily. The feds cut the health care for the money to operate these clinics for those who have, I'm going to say, kicked methadone, but need a little extra help to stay off of it. And the people I saw who were interviewed were scared. They didn't know if they could stay off meth without the support of these clinics. They said they had, those that operated the clinic said they have 1 day left, that they have enough money for 1 day. I've not heard anything since then.
I don't know if I don't have all the answers.
Still being held or not.
Excuse me, I don't have all the answers, but I know that not all of the services of that clinic are being shut down. The board is working to get those services restored and solid again, and I actually have meetings this weekend to talk to people about what we can do and how we can make sure that those services aren't interrupted. I know that these are really vital, and it's horrible that people are scared, but we are paying attention, and there's a lot of commitment both in our community and here to make sure that our community and other communities have the kinds of wraparound services that help people become self-sufficient and able to survive and thrive after coming out of drug and other problems. And my understanding is that the clinic that provides the methadone treatment is not closed at this time. But I will know more after this weekend, and this is a very high priority for us.
This is Monica. I would just add that Columbia River Mental Health closing their services is not necessarily related to state action. I understand there's a possibility that Medicaid freezes had an impact. We've received lots of questions, and we have also been calling to try and get answers. If we don't understand the problem, we can't come up with a solution. So we're going to spend some time trying to see exactly what the issue is at Columbia River Mental Health, so that the methadone clinic that is very close to my home, and one that we were there for the ribbon cutting for, because we know how important it is to the community. We're going to have to get to the bottom of the issue before we can come up with a solution. But your concern is very well taken, and we'll be doing our best to get to the bottom of it.
Jeannie, I'll just add that I'm grateful that you are engaged on this and concerned. We all need to be concerned, and I want you to know that we've been working closely with the governor's office, with the healthcare authority here in Washington State, and others to identify additional funds and support that we can try to backfill to ensure that those services remain for our community. So know that we all have eyes on this and are working hard.
Thank you. We have about 18 minutes left on this call, so if you haven't asked your question, please press 0 right now. Next up, we have one of those internet survey questions from Ashley. What measures are being taken to protect families from deportation in our community?
Well, before, this is Monica, before we were talking about the Keep Washington Working, that's one bill that we've had, or one law that we've had on the books to try and make sure that we have state policies that ensure Washingtonians can keep their lives moving along here in our community. We have a bill in the House, 1232, that addresses the private detention centers and the inspections that need to happen there and the oversight that needs to happen in a for-profit detention center. We've been trying for years to get access so that we can investigate and make sure our humanitarian efforts and standards are followed. We also have bills in both the House and the Senate. Senator Stonier, working on making sure that we are eliminating discriminatory labor policies and practices. This is directly focused on folks who may be treated differently based on their immigration status. We want to ensure that that is not something that gets in the way of people in our communities continuing their lives. I will just say this is more of we can talk about, federal and state law for a long time. This is more of a neighbor-to-neighbor communication strategy. We've got to be checking on our neighbors, seeing how they're doing, and making ourselves available to help answer questions about what their rights are in this state and in this country, because we can pass bills all we want to. It's not going to make a difference if we're not checking in on our neighbors and friends. So just want to make sure that we're doing that community work.
Thank you. Please press 0 if you have a question for your lawmakers. Next up, we have Brian about housing. Hi, Brian.
Hi, how are you? So my question was, and forgive me if this might have been addressed and I just missed it, but along with the rent increases and the housing prices, is there a bill going forward in the legislature? Like a few years ago, there was, I believe it was banning single family zoning. And now I'm not suggesting banning single family zoning, but like maybe is there anything going forward that would preclude builders or whatever to add multifamily dwellings? Like you drive by some of these old neighborhoods and you see quadplexes and duplexes sprinkled in throughout some of these older neighborhoods. Something like that, or maybe more incentives. Like I want to say Spokane was doing, for the lack of a better term, a value-added tax on developable ground to entice builders to build apartments and stuff instead of just letting it wait for the next McMansion subdivision to go in. Is there? I mean, and on with that, you're going to be adding to the workforce and all the tradesmen that are going to be building, but to basically, to lower housing costs, we really should be trying to, or at least looking at building our way out of it too, because we've been in a deficit since 2008. I'm not sure where my question got lost in there, but I'd love to hear any of your responses.
Great question, Brian. This is Annette. Absolutely. We've been focused on increasing supply of affordable housing for a number of years now. We've made some historic investments in funding for that goal. But I will mention that this year I have a bill that is progressing that actually directs the collection of some additional data to really help us to determine, are we making progress? Are we increasing the supply of housing? And if so, where are we doing that well? Where are we maybe doing it not so well? And we can provide some additional support to those areas. So I think that now's the time to ensure that we are gathering the right information so we can measure outcomes and whether we're successful. And I'll also share that we this year have a suite of bills, a package of bills that the Senate moved forward, focused on addressing some of those very things you talked about, enforcing housing mandates and requiring housing development standards to be clear, and prohibiting algorithms to be used and rent-setting software to price fix and inflate rent prices. And so I can share a little bit more with you by email if you're interested, but we're very much focused on helping to meet the goal and the need. We know that we need 1.1 million more units of housing in this state, and so big job. And we continue to invest in and work on policies that help with not only increasing supply of housing, but helping to densify our communities as well. So there's a bill that encourages transit-oriented housing, our TOD bill, which just means that we can incentivize more housing units along places where there's transportation opportunities. We've passed a bill out of the House I think is over in the Senate now related to lot splitting. So it just provides some guidelines for how you might split a residential lot and be able to build on that, moving towards the same goal of a bill you mentioned in your question related to ADUs. And then finally, we just are doing our best to make sure we're focused on all legs of the stool. We need to increase supply, yes, by building, but by also incentivizing, and we need to stabilize rent, which we've talked about already in this call. So we've done some work in the past. The problem with supply is it takes a while for it to come online, and so sometimes we don't see the impact as quickly as we'd like to.
Thank you. Okay, press 0 if you have a question. And next we have Angela, who has a question about MSOC funds for public schools. Hi, Angela.
Hi, guys. This is Angela Wilkinson. I have a question about the status of the Senate Bill 5192 and what or if any progress has been made on that.
Yeah, the Senator Noble's bill on MSOC funding, and there's a House bill as well that I think didn't make it out because we decided to pick up the Senate version of that bill is going to be a hot topic in negotiations as we try to figure out exactly where we land in investments in K-12 funding. As you know from being in our offices last week, we are focused on making investments in special ed and making sure we can do something with the operating costs in schools to help local districts with their budgeting.
Thank you. Folks, we are nearing the end of this call, so you have one more chance to ask a question. Press 0, please. And now we have Mason on the line who has a question about clean energy. Hi, Mason.
Hi. So I had a question about the Clean Energy Transformation Act. I know we passed legislation back in 2019, and we have a couple goals coming up in 2025 and 2030. I work in the solar and alternative energy industry, but I get a lot of customers now worried about the federal tax credit going away with the new administration and Congress. So my question is, where is Washington at with either refunding the old Clean Energy Act or bringing back solar incentives for residential and business?
This is Sharon. Our Climate Act provided better tools in a very timely way. We had some problems with our solar incentives a while back, and that it became oversubscribed. And so we spent a couple of years trying to come up with the balance of providing enough incentive to keep people moving forward and have it be valuable, but not so much that we broke the bank. And with the loss of federal funding, our Climate Connection Act is going to be a really key part of making sure that we do have incentives and we can keep moving forward. I think that, frankly, if we didn't have our Climate Commitment Act in place, this budget year would have made it very, very difficult to provide incentives that we want to keep providing. But our commitment is to make sure that we keep moving towards a green energy future that's better for the planet and it's better for our state. And most of us are very, very committed to not losing ground on that.
All right, thank you. Well, I'm not going to tell you to press 0 unless you really, really want to. So please go ahead and press 0 if you have a question. This is the last call for asking questions. Next up, we have Jason, who has a question about flavored vapes. Hi, Jason.
Hi, everybody. Hey, I just wanted to ask about, is kids and vaping and these flavored vapes on anybody's radar? I mean, it's rampant in our schools, and it doesn't seem like there's any kind of enforcement. My kids are telling me that kids are now buying counterfeit vapes because they can't buy them, and then they're filling them themselves. They're mixing the nicotine. They're making like super strong batches. People are getting sick. And I was just wondering if there's, I mean, it seems like we're feeding our kids to the tobacco industry.
I don't disagree, and there's two pieces of this. One is banning it, which is probably not possible. And we also have the problem of the unregulated versions that are easily accessible. What we are trying to do is to provide standards and taxation, and I believe that the taxing it like cigarettes, kids that use these products are very price sensitive, and we've learned from cigarettes that price does matter. And so coming up with the right taxing system, making sure that people know what it is they're getting, and trying to crack down on the illegal and bogus versions of this product are going to be an ongoing challenge for parents, schools, and the state. But we did have a very strong bill to provide additional taxation on the product as a way of disincentivizing kids. But this is going to be ongoing priority, and a lot of us are very, very committed to making sure that we keep working on it.
We also have bills targeting what they call entertainment vapor products, which include like video games or music. I was just talking with somebody in the hall earlier today about a bill that may actually get introduced maybe for consideration next session that goes after the bad actors who are selling these products to young people, knowing full well that they are at a price point that's lower than they should be. And so I think you're probably experiencing some of the effects of those bad actors when you describe what you know young people are doing when they can get their hands on these things. So I think we not only need to think about what it is that we have on the market in terms of flavor vapes, but we also need to think about who's selling them and what kind of accountability needs to be happening there.
And Jason, this is Annette. I'll add that, as you well know, in 2016, we as a state passed prohibition on vaping products being sold to those under 18 years of age, but we fully recognize there's a continued need to attempt to try to address this marketing to children, and we know that the products that Monica just mentioned, the vaping products that have games built right into them. I just had someone bring one to me the other day to show me, and it's clearly not something an adult would be looking to purchase. So absolutely agree with you that while we continue to look for ways to limit access, we just can't barely stay ahead of the new developments in vaping.
Our last question is not really a question, I don't think, but let's see. Brent, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I just want to thank all three of these ladies for all they do in Olympia and for making sure that we all stay informed and opening themselves up to questions from the public.
It'll be more fun when we're back in our district and we can do this in person.
That is true, and thank you for your kind comments. And yes, absolutely. As soon as session ends on April 27th, you can bet we're going to come staggering home and watch for the notice for our post-session town hall, and we're going to look forward to seeing you in person.
All right. Well, thank you. That's about all the time we have for tonight. Thank you so much for joining us, those of you who stayed on the line for the entire hour. Next up, we're going to go with closing remarks, and we're going to start with Senator Cleveland.
Well, thank you. I just want to share my appreciation for each and every one of you who took time out of a busy Thursday evening to sit down and ask questions and engage in discussion with us, and know that we're here just continuing to work through the really difficult challenges that we face as a state, and always keeping our priorities as a community and a 49th legislative district in the forefront. So thank you, and don't hesitate to continue to contact us if you have anything specific you want to be sure we know about. Thank you.
Representative Wylie?
I feel energized every time we have the communication with people from home. Folks come up here to the People's House and visit me in my office, and frankly, it keeps me getting up energetically every day. I look forward to coming home, and I learn something from my constituents, and it's a huge honor to serve, and I know that together we will be able to get through the hard times. And we will protect vulnerable people. We will commit to taking care of our planet, and our community is strong, and I appreciate you all very, very much.
And now to end this call, let's hear from Representative Stonier.
Thank you, and thank you to everyone who took the time to listen in tonight and to pose questions and sent questions ahead of time. As I said before, we are seeing record numbers of constituents showing up at town halls across the state because so many people are interested. I'm seeing now data that tells us that there were over 2,000 people on this call. I think that is by far a record for our engagement in a mid-session town hall that we do over the phone. So it is very clear that people want to know what we are up to, what we are doing to help Washingtonians in this tough time. And to the questions I get often are, how can folks help us advocate for what Washingtonians need to our federal partners? And so all of those communications are welcome. We take them seriously and are looking forward to getting back to work. We still have a number of weeks to go. I know I'll be in the House Appropriations Hearing Room A until late into the night. And I'll look forward to resting so I can get back at it again on Monday. And my seatmates here are doing the same.